Namaste. I, Dr. Eva Gupta from JAYOTI VIDYAPEETH Women's University, Jaipur, Associate Professor in Department of KRIYA SHARIR, Faculty of Agri Science. Today's session is about exchange and transport of gases. Composition of air. Composition of atmospheric air and expired air in a typical subject. Note that only a fraction of the oxygen inhaled is taken by the lungs. Then there is showing atmospheric air percentage and expired air percentage. Exchange of respiratory gases. It occurs at two levels, at lung level and at tissue level. Gases exchange is done by bulk flow diffusion. Bulk flow diffusion means transport of substances from their high partial pressure to low partial pressure. At lung level, there is an exchange between alveoli and blood, and at tissue level, there is exchange between blood and cells or tissues. In lungs, exchange occurs through respiratory membrane. Respiratory membrane is formed by alveolar epithelium and pulmonary capillary epithelium. Its thickness is about 0.1 micron. So there is a diagram showing alveolar epithelium and capillary endothelium, which forms a respiratory membrane. So respiratory membrane contains water and surfactant, alveolar epithelium, epithelial basement membrane, capillary basement membrane, capillary endothelium, and interstitial fluid. So there is a diagram showing exchange of gases. In pulmonary capillary, there is partial pressure of oxygen is 40, and in alveoli, there is partial pressure of oxygen is 100 mmHg. So oxygen enters to pulmonary capillary, and partial pressure of carbon dioxide in pulmonary capillary is 45, and in alveoli is 40. So carbon dioxide moves to alveoli from pulmonary capillary. तो ऐसे हम देखते हैं कि जो गैसेस है वो अपने ज्यादा पार्शियल प्रेशर से कम पार्शियल प्रेशर की तरफ आ रही हैं. And at systemic level or tissue level, there is a partial pressure of oxygen is 100 mmHg in systemic capillary, and in interstitial fluid or cell is 40 mmHg. So oxygen moves from capillary to tissues, and partial pressure of carbon dioxide in systemic capillary is 40, and in interstitial fluid is 45. So carbon dioxide enters to systemic capillary from tissues. Gases exchange between blood in systemic capillary and working tissue. Oxygen is high in the blood and low in the tissue, so oxygen diffuses from blood into tissue. Carbon dioxide is low in the blood and high in the tissues, so CO2 diffuses from tissue to blood. And next is transport of gases. Oxygen is transported in blood in two ways. First is simple solution, and second is combination with hemoglobin. First, simple solution. Oxygen dissolved in plasma. Only 0.3 ml per 100 ml of plasma contains oxygen, and then its transport is in very negligible amount. Importance of this condition in muscular exercise to meet the excess demand of oxygen by the tissues. And second is as combination with hemoglobin. Oxygen plus hemoglobin equal to oxyhemoglobin. 97% of oxygen is transported via combined with hemoglobin. Volume of oxygen in arterial blood is 90 ml and partial pressure is 95 mmHg. Volume of oxygen in venous blood is 40 ml and partial pressure is 40 mmHg. oxygen transport in combination with hemoglobin. 1 gram of hemoglobin contains 1.32 ml of oxygen. Oxygen combines with hemoglobin as physical combination, means no oxidation, neither oxygenation. Means no oxidation, rather oxygenation. It is only a oxygenation where oxygen and hemoglobin combines, and there is no chemical reaction. Hemoglobin accepts oxygen readily whenever the partial pressure of oxygen in the blood is more. Hemoglobin gives out oxygen whenever the partial pressure of oxygen in the blood is less. Oxygen combines with heme part of hemoglobin. Each molecule of hemoglobin contains 4 atoms of iron that combines with molecules of oxygen. The iron of the hemoglobin is remained in ferrous form. Therefore, it is called oxygenation, not oxidation. 1 gram of hemoglobin contains 1.34 ml of oxygen, and normal hemoglobin contains 50 gram percentage. So the blood with 15 gram hemoglobin carries 20.1 ml of oxygen, but it contains only 90 ml% of oxygen because hemoglobin is not fully saturated with oxygen. Its oxygen carrying capacity is only 95%. Means hemoglobin oxygen carrying capacity of blood is 95%. So there is only 90 ml% oxygen, not 20.1 ml of oxygen. Next is transport of carbon dioxide. In arterial blood, volume of CO2 equal to 48 ml percentage and partial pressure is 40 mmHg. In venous blood, volume of CO2 equal to 52 ml percentage and partial pressure is 46 mmHg. Transport of CO2 occurs in following ways. First, as dissolved form, as carbonic acid, as bicarbonates, and as carbamino compounds. First, transport of carbon dioxide as dissolved form. Carbon dioxide diffuses in blood and dissolves in fluid of plasma. Only 7% of carbon dioxide is transported as dissolved form. Transport of CO2 as carbonic acid. Dissolved CO2 is in plasma, combines with water to form carbonic acid. This type of transport is in negligible amount because carbonic acid is very unstable compound and it divides into water and CO2. Next is transport of carbon dioxide as bicarbonate. 63% of CO2 transport via this method. It is divided into two parts. First, when CO2 when reaction of CO2 while entering RBC. In RBC, CO2, which is produced by metabolic waste, combines with water to form carbonic acid in presence of carbonic anhydrase. Carbonic acid is very unstable compound and it divides into H plus ion and bicarbonate ion. Increases concentration of bicarbonate ion causes diffusion of bicarbonate ion through the cell membrane into the plasma and shifting of chloride ion into the RBC to maintain electrolyte equilibrium. It is called chloride shift or hamburger phenomenon. And H plus ion, which is arised from carbonic acid, buffered by hemoglobin inside the cell. As we know, hemoglobin is a buffer in our blood. And second process occurs when blood reaches the alveoli. When blood reaches the alveoli, sodium bicarbonate, which is traveled in blood, is divided into sodium ion and bicarbonate ion. Bicarbonate ion moves into RBC in exchange of chloride ion. It is called reverse chloride shift. In RBCs, bicarbonate ion combine with H plus ion and form carbonic acid, and carbonic acid divided into carbon dioxide and water, and This carbon dioxide is expelled out by lungs. Transport of CO2 as carbamino compounds. 30% of carbon dioxide is transported in this way. Carbon dioxide is transported in blood in combination with hemoglobin and plasma proteins. Carbon dioxide plus hemoglobin means carb hemoglobin, and carbon dioxide plus plasma proteins means carb amino proteins. There is no chemical reaction, there is only addition. Oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. It is demonstrate the relationship between the partial pressure of oxygen and the percentage saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen. Normally in the blood, hemoglobin is saturated with oxygen only up to 95%. The saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen depends upon the partial pressure of oxygen. Normal oxygen dissociation curve is S-shaped or sigmoid shape. Lower part of curve indicates dissociation of oxygen from hemoglobin, and upper part of curve denotes acceptance of oxygen by hemoglobin depending upon the partial pressure of oxygen. Then factors affecting oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. First, shift to left means when curve shift to left because of acceptance or association of oxygen by hemoglobin. Curve shift to right because of dissociation of oxygen from hemoglobin. Shift to right decreases in partial pressure of oxygen, increases in partial pressure of carbon dioxide, increases in hydrogen ion concentration and decrease in pH, increased body temperature, excess of DPG means 2,3-diphosphoglyceric acid, phosphoglycerate. DPG is a byproduct in EMF pathway of carbohydrate metabolism. It is present in RBCs. Shift to left. In fetal blood, fetal hemoglobin has more affinity for oxygen than the adult hemoglobin. Decreases in hydrogen ion concentration and increase in pH or alkalinity. Bore effect. In tissue, due to metabolic activities, the partial pressure of CO2 is very high and the partial pressure of oxygen is low. Due to pressure gradient, CO2 enters the blood and oxygen is released from the blood to tissues. The presence of CO2 decreases the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen and hence the further release of oxygen to the tissues and shift curve to right. And there is a diagram showing effect of pH on affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen and effect of the partial pressure of CO2 on affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen. Bore effect. Multiple factors affect the saturation of hemoglobin like pH, PCO2 means partial pressure of CO2, temperature and 2,3-DPG, diphosphoglyceric acid. Lower pH, higher partial pressure of CO2, higher temperature and more 2,3-DPG shift curve to right, causing hemoglobin to release more oxygen. Higher pH and lower PCO2, lower temperature and less 2,3-DPG cause hemoglobin to hold on to more oxygen. And there is some questions. Reference books. Thank you.